We're live now.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to our bi-weekly Charm workshops, aka Charm Schools. This is the last one for the calendar year 2014. Yay, so we've had a good year of Charm Schools. These are all available on juju.ubuntu.com/videos. The way this works is we take feedback from the community on what topics people would like to see improved upon in Juju or expanded upon or explained. And what we do is we do a hangout like this, and then we grab an expert and we just start to dig in. So this topic for this week is going to be writing charms for restricted networks, which is I don't know. At first I thought it was pretty strange, but then if you look at how people deploy things in the real world, especially in larger companies, you have things like firewalls, and no, you just don't let servers randomly be able to pull things from the internet. So if you're used to coming from Juju from like a developer standpoint, where you're running containers and everything just grabs what it needs, and your charm is pulling stuff from GitHub constantly. Once you get inside a corporate environment or in kind of controlled production environment, where every single thing needs to be checked or maybe audited, it's a whole different ballgame, as was learned by Matt Bruzek when he first joined and we started working on getting some charms ported over to Power 8. We had these Power 8 machines in a lab, which means it was in a proper data center, which means that we had to deal with these sorts of issues as far as connecting to outside resources. And it was tough going, but we learned a lot. So what this session is going to be on is basically how to plan for things that want to hit the network, and how to write charms in a way that's amenable to that. And Kevin has had some experience as well in this. We've tended to call these fat charms, which means that if you can't really hit the network, since charms kind of let you do whatever you want, you could just bundle. You can make a directory in there called Big Binary Blob and shove everything in there if you wanted to, or you could stick debs in there. We really don't. You can really do what you want, but that, because you can, doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea. So with that, Matt's going to lead on some of the best practices that he's learned over using these disconnected labs, and I know Kevin has hit some issues as well when the fat charms get so big with software that's so huge that it starts to become an issue. So with that, Matt, why don't you start, and then we'll start the discussion from there.
Sure. All right, thanks, George. Yeah, so why are we talking about restrictive networks? Why do you care? There's a lot of companies and governments that implement security policies where their cloud servers are isolated from the internet. And there's a lot of restrictions, including Canonical. We have some servers that don't have access to the internet, direct access. So a lot of times you may find yourself in a restricted environment, and sometimes the charms don't take that into account. So, just going to define a restricted environment. It's any environment where the server running Juju doesn't have full access to the network access to the outside world. This is also known as an isolated network. Again, where local machines they can reach other local machines, but you can't reach the internet. Some corporate firewalls may block certain ports, so it might not be completely isolated. There might be just some port restrictions or other restrictions that will make our charms not work so well. So I'm here to talk about how to make them work better and what you can do in Juju. All right, so how is this different than a normal environment? I know that from testing the charms, a lot of times the charms just assume that they can have full access to the internet. So there's people writing charms that use wget, that use curl, that apt-get install stuff and get stuff from Git or Bazaar or Mercurial or any of the other version control systems in the charm. And we found that a lot of these internet accesses you can't depend on them in these limited network environments. So we're actually going to rebrand the word fat charm into a self-contained charm, George. I think that makes a little more sense. But yeah, we've got some. A self-contained charm is basically a charm that contains the binary payload inside the charm so that internet access is not required. So you can build charms that contain all the bits that you need to deploy it. You know, as George said, they're also called fat charms or self-contained charms. So the great thing about Juju is you can, if there's not already a charm out there that's self-contained, you can make it one if you'd want. You can branch a charm locally, and you can add this kind of logic all by yourself and contribute that back to the community if you have the capability to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to go into I'm going to share my screen and show you what the problems are, and then show you how to fix them. So let me get here. Okay, so right here I have my, this is a server we have in our lab that doesn't have access to the internet. We have to use proxies to get out. I've bootstrapped the environment, so basically I've just installed Juju, I've bootstrapped the environment, and I will try to deploy one of our most simple charms, Ubuntu, and that basically just puts a clean version of Ubuntu out there as a virtual machine. As you can see, this command's taking a long time. It's trying to go, what Juju's trying to do is trying to go out to the charm store, grab some information, and then come back and process that information from the charm store. But it can't get to the charm store because there's no access to the internet. And we'll let it run here, and I'll move along to some of the other topics. So the solution to this is a proxy, and a proxy server is just a computer that acts as an intermediary between the computer and the internet, and it allows other clients to make indirect network connections for the network services, and that's what we're going to need here to solve this problem. And really, when you're talking about Juju, you're talking about two different kinds of proxies. The Juju host itself needs to have access to the internet to access the charm store and other services out there, but then the charms themselves have to have proxies so that when the charms are running, those are different servers in that of themselves, and they should also have a proxy. So I'm just going to first touch on the proxies on the Linux host here that we're running Juju on, and this is why, because we don't have a proxy, this is why Ubuntu is failing to deploy here, because it doesn't have a way to get to the charm store, and it's going to report that error here after it times out any minute now. So what I'm going to do is I can add the proxy to the Linux host that we're using, and then there's a way to add the proxies within Juju. So adding the proxies to the host just fixes it so that Juju can access the internet. But when you also want the charms to access the internet, that's a different proxy, and I'll show you how to set up both types. All right, here we go. We get an error, and we get the right error. This is great. You know, it says error, can't access the charm store. Are you connected to the internet? And you know, technically this computer is, but it just doesn't know how to get out to the charm store here. And I can show you that this fails just by copying this link and saying wget. You know, and of course it's going to sit there forever and time out again, so I'm going to cancel that. All right, so here's the solution. You got to set up proxies for your environment, and what you can do is, I'm just going to export these variables here. I'm exporting HTTP_proxy, and this just happens to be our proxy server that we're using right now in the lab. I'm going to export HTTPS, because if you notice, the request to the charm store was done over port, I think it says in here port 443. Yeah, so that's HTTPS request. So you also need to export the HTTPS proxy. and that's very similar in our environment. And then there's one other thing that makes Juju work a little bit better is you can export the no proxy, which are the list of servers that you don't want to proxy. And I'll paste that in here. So we don't want to proxy anything that goes to the local host, the loopback device, or 10.0.3.1, which just happens to be the first node in our Juju network. So again, we're going to try that. I found that we have to destroy environment for some reason I'm not clear on.
So far, these are pretty standard environment variables that people have seen before. They're not
Right.
Juju
Right.
specific.
This is nothing Juju specific. This is just the server, the host that's running Juju. Just how does it get to the internet? And I'm going to rebootstrap this one. Just Juju bootstrap. So this is just going to have allow the host that I'm running on get to the internet so Juju works better. And it's almost done here, and then we'll redeploy Juju, and then I can talk about how you fix it. You fix it so Juju can pass these proxies to the guests when it's deploying the services. All right, so there it is, and now I expect the deploying Ubuntu will work, and life will be great. There it goes. So it went to the charm store, it got the information it needed. Now it is adding the Ubuntu charm to the charm store. And I'm just going to deploy, I'm going to also deploy the GUI from the local repository because it's a slight bit faster. And just deploy another charm here as well. But first I want to talk about going into the environments variable. So now we need to fix Juju, so Juju passes these proxies to the guests when it creates them. So we'll go into your .juju directory and your home directory. So cd juju, and we're going to edit the environments.yaml. I'm going to edit that file. Okay, and right here, this is the basic things that you need to get your local environment up. And now Juju recognizes some proxy variables. I'm going to just paste them in here. Okay, and so again, in this case, they're HTTP dash proxy instead of underscore. This is just a little bit different way to describe it. HTTPS dash proxy for the HTTPS proxy, and then there's no dash proxy for the servers you don't want to proxy. I'm just going to write and quit that, and I don't remember if we have to do a destroy environment for this one or not. So
Well, while you do that,
yep.
I wonder why we just don't inherit the host's environment.
Well, there might be some cases where you don't want to,
Okay.
and there might be some cases where you want to set different proxies for Juju. So,
Okay, fair enough.
and this is in the documentation now. This part, because this part's Juju specific. This part is documented in our documentation, and I'll put a link in the show notes here afterward. But you can read about the no proxy and the HTTPS and HTTP proxy on the link that I'll share in the show notes. But basically, yeah, I think it's because we want to be able to set different proxies for Juju, because you might have a proxy on this host, but you might not want the subordinates to inherit that all the time.
Okay.
Matt, these are Juju specific details that will not work in your machine, like in your overall machine, just with Juju, right?
Say that again?
So these variables you're setting will only work with Juju, right?
Yep. I was just setting that in the Juju environment file So in the environments.yaml file. So those are just for that environment. If you have other environments such as AWS or HP Cloud, you could set different proxies for those if you'd like. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and just for a heads up, Juju will respect like the overall system-wide Etsy environments if you have proxies or anywhere you have those variables defined. But yeah, like Matt said, this is just going to proxy Juju.
Okay. I'm just deploying a few more charms here. All right. So basically, what we just fixed was we set the proxies on Juju so that when it deploys those charms, they have access to these proxies as well, and they're going to be able to use wget or all those other tools as long as they're using the proxy. So what I want to talk about now is how do you write some of these self-contained charms, or what's the strategy with that? So let me back up here and say that you still, even with these proxies set, some of the commands might not work. There might be some commands that are getting stuff from the internet that aren't going over HTTP proxy or the ports that you have available. So it still would be maybe a good idea to write a self-contained charm. And I happen to have one on this system here that is a pretty good example. But the basic strategy, the pseudocode here is you want to check if you want to make a self-contained charm. You check to see if the Debian package is inside the charm first, and then if it's not, then you download it from the internet and go along normal charm install path. But if so that way, if somebody puts the Debian package inside the charm and uses that on this kind of a server, it doesn't need to go to the internet to download that. It doesn't have to be a Debian package. It could be a tar or whatever binary package you need. But that's the basic gist of creating a self-contained charm. And
so Matt,
go ahead.
If I can interject a question here, you're saying that one solution here was to do the proxy stuff so that your restricted system can get out to the network, but now it sounds like what you're describing with self-contained charms is that this would work without the proxy, so you're going to pack the needed bits into the charm itself, right?
Right, yeah, and in some cases the proxying bits don't always work because some of the tools don't use HTTP protocols to get things, right? So there might be some cases where you actually need to do a self-contained charm rather than this HTTP proxy will solve 80% of the charms, but there are some charms out there that don't work over the HTTP proxy. One of the things that doesn't work over HTTP proxy is the apt-key command, and I can do man apt-key. Now this
right, because a GPG key is not going over a HTTP port. It's got its own port.
Right. But there's and I've seen a couple of charms that use wget to get the key, so they'll get the key this way.
Okay.
That's not going to work in a limited environment, and neither is just the normal use of apt-key, which is like this. This is how you would say I want the key for this specific.
Right.
It uses a port that's not over HTTP.
Right.
So the right way to do that, and you can change apt-key to use the HTTP port 80, and you can configure it to get the key like this.
Okay.
That's a way that'll work over the HTTP port. You notice here I use port 80 there for the and you have to use the HKP header on the server. So that's one way to get things get around proxy. If you're using a proxy and you're trying, that's a command that would use a different port other than the proxy and would still fail. So, so I'm going to go here into the Cassandra charm, because this is an example of how we created a self-contained charm. Oh, I'm in Juju. And so I'm just going to go into the hook. I'm going to go in the install hook. All right, this one happens to be written in Bash, but I changed this to use the self-contained logic so that we could on limited network environments we could put the bundle or the when you're deploying it so it doesn't have to go to the internet. So basically right here it says if does the package, is it contained within the charm, and if it is, then I'm going to install it using the Debian package manager right here. And that's all I added to this charm. This is a charm that was written by somebody else, but this is all that I added to the charm to make it run in a limited network environment. Otherwise, it's going to go and try to get the key from the key server, and then it's going to try to download the package, which may or may not work if you don't have proxies in running on that system. Does that make it clear, Kevin?
So, Matt, I have a question over here.
Sure.
What happens if you add those Debian packages to your charm directly? If you make a fat charm, will it take longer to deploy because it needs to upload those packages too, or will it be the same average time that it takes to deploy a charm?
That's a really good question. So if you added the Debian package to your charm, my recommendation would be then to copy that charm to the server you're deploying from and then deploy it as a local charm, because that will take less time because it's not going over the internet to grab the bits. It's going to read it straight from disk, so that will be faster. But if you made a fat charm or a self-contained charm and then you tried to get that over the internet, that might be a little bit slower. But there's things you can mitigate that with, such as a caching proxy. We've talked about proxies just as an intermediary, but a lot of times people will add caching to the proxy where if you request packages or you request information from a cache, it'll check the local version first and then go to the internet if it needs to, and so those could be faster or made faster that way. But I would make a local charm if you made it a self-contained charm. I would download it on that server, and it deploys a lot faster than it would have over the internet. So, all right, so we'll go back to.
Sorry, just a quick best practice question there for you.
Sure.
So you recommend that people take their dabs and tarballs and put them in the charm itself, or would you say it's more appropriate, maybe having your own internal repository or your own internal?
No, I don't recommend that people go out and make fat charms. If they need to, I think that they should. I use the example of Cassandra because it's not technically a fat charm. It's a charm that has the ability to be fat if you put the Debian package in there. Right now, in the Cassandra charm, there is no Debian package in that charm at all. I just recommend putting the logic in there, and to when you're writing a charm, to remember that you can write it in such a way that people could deploy this in a limited network environment. I went through a lot of charms that just assume that they have full access to the internet, and they're
Right.
getting things, and they're installing things from GitHub and all sorts of places.
Right.
And that's fine, but in a network environment where we have only access through proxies and stuff, it's a little bit
Right.
harder and it doesn't work that well. So no, I'm not suggesting that everybody makes a fat charm, and I'm not suggesting that they use a caching proxy. I'm just saying that you can write your charm in such a way that it could be a fat or a self-contained charm if if you put that binary
Right.
in there, and then people would have an easier time deploying it. So.
I think that's a great.
Right. Okay, let me rephrase that question here. All right, let's say I'm internal and
Yep.
I've got access to my internal network at work.
Yep.
And I have my software, and let's just say it's a tarball.
Yep.
So, it's not really going to be in the charm store. This is all internal only. Is it better for me to put that tarball in the charm so that when I add unit, Juju copies it internally and all that stuff? Or is it better for me to have an internal server, HTTP, rsync, whatever it is, doesn't matter, where I kind of put the payloads there, and is it more efficient for Juju to then fetch, but internally? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Is it better to bundle stuff in the charm or to shove it all in an internal GitHub repository, for example?
I think it would be better to have it. I think it would be better to have it in internal in a charm, because then the charm is truly self-contained. The way you're talking about having a caching proxy external, it would have to be set up outside of Juju or in a different way. Maybe we could have a charm for that, but we would have to set it up so that it would be things outside of Juju. I think it'd be better to have it internally, and okay. I think it would be faster too. I don't know the internals on how they handle that, but I do think it would be faster to do it that way.
Okay.
All right. So I just deployed all this services on our server, and I'm just gonna go and show that we indeed deployed everything. Everything came up, and it's not. I'm not lying to you. Let me grab this here. All right, so I'll go here. So I'm going to the Juju GUI interface here. I'm going to show you that those actually did deploy, and they came up okay on a limited environment, which I showed you earlier didn't come up. Getting started. So there's the Nagios charm and Ubuntu, and if we go to Nagios, should be able to. Services. And here we go. Running unit. Be able to just go to this thing, and that's Nagios page. I don't have the admin handy, but you see that the charms did deploy. This is all running locally on this system, and the network, was limited before I used the proxies to clear it up. So let's see. Other examples of self-contained charms. So if you're reading there, if you're watching this video and you want to learn more about self-contained, I'm going to say the Cassandra charm is the golden standard right now. It's not actually all self-contained yet. You could download that charm locally and then put in the Cassandra Debian package, and then everything, it would deploy without connection to the internet. There's another one called DB2-Express-C, which is a fat charm which has all the binaries inside the charm, which is a good example of a self-contained charm as well. And the WebSphere Liberty charm, WebSphere-Liberty, is another example of a self-contained charm. So, okay, Matt, is there any other questions? Yep.
Yeah, Matt, let me make a comment on the DB2 charm. I wrote that one, and it is a really large charm. And what I'm hearing from what you've said before is it's probably a better idea to stub out that logic. If there's a local deb file, great, install that instead of trying to do apt-get stuff. In the case of DB2, there's not a repository out there to do that with, but I still think that you might hinder people that are not on restrictive charms or not on restricted networks by having these self-contained charms. In the case of DB2, it's like 600 megabytes. So even if I wasn't restricted, and I try to download that charm or Juju deploy that charm, it's going to take a long time to transfer that over the network. So I really like the idea of stubbing in the, if you've got a local deb or any local sources or a local repo that you want to point to, anything that you may want to do that's going to be done in a restrictive network, sort of do that as a stub and let that person or that Juju admin clone that charm or branch that charm and sort of add those bits in later. Because you do hurt people that aren't on restrictive networks, which I think maybe a lot of folks.
Well,
so
definitely you're right there. And this is the whole reason for this charm school. I'm just trying to get people aware of the restricted network environment, and you'd be surprised at how many people actually are on a restricted network, including Canonical. We had these servers under behind a firewall, and we had to use proxies to get them out. So I think that it's best to make it self-contained, capable, like the Cassandra charm. But in certain cases, it makes sense to include all of the binaries because they're not always going to be as big as the DB2 binary. There'll be other binaries that are a little bit smaller and more. And I just want charm authors to realize that there's another way to write these, and there's another use case that you might not be familiar with. These restricted network environments.
It's big options and charms. You have no idea until you're like, hey, by the way, and it's also like that with clouds as well, right? Don't assume that a resource is there just because it's one cloud provider, but then you try to run it on bare metal and it's missing.
Right. And websites go up and down. If GitHub's having a problem and one of the charms that you're authoring, relies on GitHub to get some of the information, it's just not going to work. If GitHub went down or some other website that you're using went down, and so I think it's just a different thing to think about when you're writing a charm, and it's certainly not required, but it's a good idea to do that. And we had experienced it quite a bit when I was using these new servers in the lab. So I just wanted to say we can also do Juju will also recognize additional proxy options for the apt-get protocol. So if you wanted to go into the environments.yaml file, you could also set values for configuring apt-get proxies. Oops, I didn't copy those correctly. So you can say if you have if you're having problems getting packages available, you can set apt-get or apt-http proxy, apt-https proxy, and there's even an apt-ftp proxy, which is again documented in the Juju docs. If you need that kind of help or need that kind of ability to do that. All right. Are there any other questions from the audience? Oh, you're not seeing my screen. I'm sorry. What? All right. So here we go. Here are the proxies again. I'm sorry. I was wasn't aware you couldn't see that. So you could set those in your environment file as well. If you had a squid caching proxy, and a lot of times that'll speed everything up because if you make everybody that's all the charms that are using or that are deployed by Juju, they will use this apt repository, and that'll really speed things up if you have a local squid deb proxy where all the Ubuntu packages are located at. So that's all I had there. All right. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any questions in IRC.
Okay. Well, luckily I had some backup material here. There's
I have
also
wider-reaching questions, but I was going to save them to the end because they're kind of, I don't know if you're going to answer them or not. Uh, uh,
I think we lost him. Just move on.
Okay. All right. I was trying to listen to George's question, but he got really slow all of a sudden. All right. So there's one more thing that I use quite a bit when I'm doing these servers behind a firewall. Um, Sometimes when I'm running, and this doesn't apply to proxies or developing in a restricted network environment at all, but
what
sometimes I use a tool called SShuttle to basically VPN, and it sends all of the connection data to my laptop um, from another server. So if you're trying to get to some of these, this is how I got to the Juju GUI, and I can show you this here if I share this window with you. Okay, so this is my configuration setup for using SShuttle, and this is kind of a lesser known tool that's really powerful. Um, and I'll break it down what's going on here. SShuttle, you can install that with apt-get install SShuttle. The R flag is a remote flag, and that is it can take a host name and a username and a port for the remote server. So you're going to specify the remote server here, and then you specify the ranges that you want to proxy over SShuttle, and it goes and creates an SSH connection and creates a VPN tunnel to that server, and only sends the this is a CIDR notation for 10.0.3. anything, and it'll send all the traffic to that server from your laptop. So I can look at Juju uses the 10.0.0 or 10.0.3 network for its local host, and I'm doing a lot of local stuff on this server, so I wasn't able to see like the Juju GUI until I used this shuttle. And what it does is it just goes and connects to the other server over SSH, and then it can forward you the traffic, and then you'll see a lot of the traffic messages. So it's kind of a cool tool. You should check that out. SShuttle. It's kind of a very useful tool for this kind of server environment.
Matt, it's mega useful. I'll plus one your SShuttle recommendation there. Some people might look at it and say, why don't I just SSH tunnel, right? Just open a local port and do a local host over an SSH tunnel. And that's fine if you've got one or two ports, but like in your case, maybe you connected to port 80 and then it moved you over to 443, right, for the HTTPS. With SShuttle, you don't have to worry about which ports to forward and not, and you get to use the actual IP address. You don't have to worry with localhost and which port is this tunnel bound to and all that jazz. So I really like that tool as a way for getting into restricted networks, if it's allowed in your environment.
Yep. Yeah, and the setup on SShuttle is going to be different for every use. So I really didn't want to bring that up until the end here because it'll be different for every environment. But it's a very useful tool. I would highly recommend you checking it out. So, but yeah, the general way to use it is I'll share my screen here just real quick, and you open a terminal and you just would type in SShuttle -R for remote, the user that you're going to connect as, and then the remote server, and then the range of IPs that you want this VPN connection on. And it's just a really great tool, so highly recommend
And
it.
not Ubuntu specific either. If you happen to be on a different system, it's not on GitHub. You can take a look at SShuttle.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's
available for lots of distros, so it's +1 from me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. That's a good point. Okay.
We have a
Well.
question from George here. The question he wanted to ask before he left us.
Okay.
Do we have any things in place to allow people to host their own internal charm store?
Um, you know, I don't know about that. I haven't had any experience with that. I can't speak to hosting your own charm store internally, George. I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
Yeah, I know the code is out there. It's obviously all open source, but just
Okay.
wondering if anyone had actually done a full-blown internal charm store. You're like, we can import these. These things are public. We'll import these, and then all the work-related stuff, all behind your own firewall.
Sure.
Which I'm sure
If we get any information, we will definitely put the link in the description.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, I haven't done that, George. I can't speak to that. I'm sorry. All right. All right. So where to go if you guys have any problems? So if you have any problems whatsoever, please feel free to join us on Juju, pound Juju on irc.freenode.net, and we also have a mailing list available at Juju. Juju@lists.ubuntu.com, and you can post a question on askubuntu.com and tag it with Juju. Thanks for attending the Charm School, and I hope your networks are unrestricted.
And that's basically it. This is the last one for the year, so everyone, thanks for listening in another year's worth of Charm Schools. We'll go ahead and post this on the website, and I'll send a message to the list with the stream URL so you can pass this video along to other people as well. So with that, thank you very much. Happy holidays, everyone, and have a happy new year.
All right, thanks.
Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube at youtube.com/ubuntuonair and follow us on Twitter for future updates at twitter.com/ubuntuonair. We'll be having some more sessions at Ubuntu on Air that are not Juju related, but you may be interested in them, so make sure to take a look in there. So with that, I guess I'll see you next time.
All right, thank you.
See you guys.